Hello there, and welcome to Play the Game with Steve. Villains Beyond, Episode 16, Nebula. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Nebula's stats. We're going to take a look at her unique villain scenario and playstyle. And we're going to take obviously a look at her signature cards and how they'll interact and punish our heroes. We're going to take a look at why we call her the Surge Queen of Marvel Champions. And then finally, we're going to take a look at some of the modular sets to either increase the thematics difficulty, maybe lower the difficulty, and overall just enjoyment of this scenario. So all this and more on this episode of Villains Beyond, Nebula. All right, so Nebula is a criminal on all three stages. On stage 1 is a little different than stage 2 and 3. So Nebula stage 1 has a scheme of 1 and attack of 2, both with an asterisk, and also something that says the first technique attachment revealed each round gains surge. So that is only 1. The force interrupt is when Nebula initiates an activation against you. You resolve the special ability on each technique attachment in play. Then you discard each of those attachments. On stage 2, she has a scheme of 2 and an attack of 2. She has 17 hit points per player. She has the first technique attachment each player reveals. Each round gains surge. So now instead of just having it happening once, it's going to happen against every player, the surge. And then the force interrupt, again, is when Nebula initiates an activation against you. You resolve the special ability on each technique attachment in play, and then you choose and discard one of those attachments. So again, not discarding all of them, but just one at a time. And on stage 3, she has a scheme of 2, an attack of 3, and 20 hit points per player. She has the first technique attachment each player reveals each round, gains surge. So again, that comes back. And then that force interrupt is even more brutal this time, is when Nebula initiates an activation against you. You resolve the special ability on each technique attachment in play. And then you may then remove the top card of your deck from the game to choose and discard one of those attachments. So really on stage 3, you really gotta rush her down, or else you're gonna lose all of your deck to get rid of those attachments. Nebula has 2 main schemes. The first one's called the Art of Evasion. 1A has a setup, put the Nebula ship environment and the Milano support into play. You attach the Power Stone to Nebula. You then discard the top 2 cards per player of the encounter deck, then attach each technique attachment discarded this way to Nebula. Then you'll flip. The Art of Evasion will start at 2 per player. It goes up by X per player, and X is equal to the number of evasion ships on Nebula's ship, and then there is a maximum of 6 per player. And if you lose that main scheme, you will go into Warp Drive Initiated. When revealed, you'll place 2 evasion counters on Nebula's ship, and then for each evasion counter on Nebula's ship, you're going to discard the top 2 cards of each player's deck and the encounter deck. And then on the stage 2B, it'll start at 3 per player. It'll go up by X per player. Well, X is equal to the number of evasion counters on Nebula's ship, and it has a maximum of 9 per player. And if ever this stage is completed, the players will lose the game. All right, let's take a look at Nebula's ship. Nebula's ship is an aerial vehicle environment, forced interrupt. When the villain phase begins, you place 1 evasion counter here. So that is before you place threat on the main scheme. Shoot the thrusters. The first player action, exhaust the Milano and spend up to 2 resources of any type. And you remove 1 evasion counter from here for each resource spent this way. And now it is very important that only the first player in a multiplayer game can activate this ability, and definitely needs to do that. Nebula is all about her technique. So the first one we have is Cutthroat Ambition. You attach this to Nebula. It has a boost icon. It says Nebula cannot take more than 5 damage from a single attack. And a special, you'll place 1 threat on the main scheme. And as a boost, after this activation ends, you'll attach this card to Nebula and resolve its special ability. So there you go. So that is the first one. The second one, she has 2 copies of Weapon Mastery. And again, you'll attach this to Nebula. Nebula gains Retaliate 1. The special is take 1 damage. The boost, again, I'll have the same reading. After the activation ends, you attach this card to Nebula and resolve its special ability. Then we have the last one that has 2 copies of. It is the wide stance. You reduce the amount of damage Nebula takes from each attack by 1. And the special, which is the most hurtful, is discard 1 card at random from your hand. I really don't like this one. And again, the boost is the same. You attach it and then resolve its effect. And then she has 2 single copies of this. 2 single copies of the last 2 is Unyielding Persistence. You'll attach this to Nebula. She'll gain Stalwart, and you'll give Nebula a tough status card. And if she already has a tough status card, you'll give Nebula a face down boost card. Again, same thing for the boost. You'll attach it and resolve its effect. And then finally, Evasive Maneuvering. She will gain Stalwart again, and then you are stunned. And if you're already stunned, you give Nebula a face down boost card. And again, the boost effect on that is the same, that you will attach it and resolve that effect. Now she also has a couple of ways to get those attachments out. It's with her side scheme called Lethal Intent. She's got 2 copies of those. Starts at 2 per player and gives an extra encounter card. When revealed, you'll discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until a technique attachment is discarded, and then you'll reveal that card. And then most likely it's going to surge, because again, the first technique attached revealed each round gains surge. So that is good. So when they come in as boost cards, a little clarification, you will reveal, you will resolve the ability, but you do not reveal them. With Lethal Intent, you do reveal those attachments. All right, so that's 2 ways in her deck that gain surge. Then she has Combat Ready, 2 copies of this. When revealed, you'll discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until a technique attachment is discarded. And then you'll reveal that card, then resolve its special ability. And again, so you will surge on that as well. So again, 2 copies. Now you're starting to understand why we call her the Surge Queen. After that, you will have Barrel Roll, 2 copies of that, Treachery, Insight 1, and Surge. And when revealed, you'll place an evasion counter on Nebula's ship. As a boost effect, she'll place 1 evasion counter on Nebula's ship. So again, more surging. And then finally, she has the Ruthless. When revealed in Alter Ego, Nebula is going to scheme. And if threat is placed by this activation, place an evasion counter on Nebula's ship. And then when revealed in hero form, Nebula attacks you. And if damage is dealt by this activation, place 1 evasion counter on her ship. Now again, scheming, unless she's confused, and that is not going to place an evasion. That's the only way to avoid the evasion here. And then, or if you can have a card that says prevent threat from going, and we've seen those before as well in Justice. There's a couple cards that do that. And then in hero form, if you are tough and you don't take damage, but again, to clarify, if you defend with an ally, the ally is taking damage, then that evasion counter will happen as well. So that is it for her kit. So every kit in her, every card in her kit is technically going to either make her surge or add evasion counters, which is very, very punishing mechanic, especially for a hero kit, which makes Nebula very, very frustrating for most players. All right, so before we get into some of the modular set, here's a little variant that you can include, very simple if you want to change it up without really messing up the game too much. So one thing I can suggest is keep the Milano there. Obviously, you need it to remove the ship counters off of Nebula's ship. But remove the ship command modular, and then instead add 2 modulars that are going to be different instead of just 1. So that is one way to just change it up. Obviously, if you don't have all of the other ship command cards, there's going to be less chance or less things to do with the Milano, so that Milano can focus always on just removing counters, which is going to make the game a little bit easier for you in the long run. All right, now let's take a look at some of the modulars I would include to increase the overall thematic. So the first modular sets that I would include, and thank you very much to Stéphane Jarny from France, who sent me these really awesome dividers. So thematically, in thematics, the first one I would include is a bunch of criminals. So the Iron Spider's Sinister Six would be the one I would include. It has the Hobgoblin, Surgeon Crime, Iron Spider, Bombshell, Spot, Grand Larceny, Electro, and Sandman. These are all criminal minions. So for me, this makes a lot of sense to include these guys with Nebula. She's got her own little posse. The second one I would recommend to include is also Galactic Artifacts. Galactic Artifacts has 9 cards, so she just stole a whole bunch of stuff from she stole the Power Stone, but why not steal more stuff from the collector's collection? So adding all of these cards here are also going to be able to really increase Nebula's deck size, which means their techniques are going to happen a lot less. So it should make the game a little bit easier as well. And finally, thematically, I really like the Reavers. Why? Because look at this. Cybernetic enhancements. I'm like, come on, how more on theme could you have? They are a little bit harder as a minion set because of the whole teamwork thing, and they are pretty brutal. But overall, I think it's a good modular set that just fits the team. So if you add the criminals with the Reavers, so you have a really big deck. One thing I'm going to say is all the modular sets that I'm including, I think aside from the Sinister Six and Nebula, will all have more than 9 cards in those modular sets. So just again, to just make it just a little bit more easy and just kind of dilute her deck, or just kind of not dilute, but just kind of like saturate her deck with extra cards. So she's like the kind of villain that you want to hit Shadows of the Past with. All right, if we want to decrease the difficulty for Nebula, so here are my recommendations. The first one is going to be all in the Guardians box. So the Band of Badoon that has 10 minions. So the Lieutenants, the Sentries, the Warlords, the Grunts, and the Assassins. Just be careful with the Grunts. So always try to maybe keep one minion in play engaged with you if you do not want to get extra cards. So I think that for me is very good, super easy with Nebula. The fact that there's 10 cards in this, it just makes it just right. The other one, again, is the Menagerie Medley. Again, has 9 cards between the Servant Bots, the Star Sharks, and the Ghost. I think you have a nice array of minions. Again, that's going to dilute, get rid of those pirates. And again, this is a little bit harder than I would say, than the Band of Badoon. But again, because of the Ghost, that they just kind of have a tendency to come in. But it just gives you something a little bit interesting to defeat. And then finally, the last one I would say to include, which is probably just a little bit harder than the Menagerie, is the Kree Militants. Again, with the Lieutenants that give the +3 boost, the Commandos that give piercing, and the Privates that have the overkill. I think those minions here just kind of add a little bit more danger to the game. So you have to be more vigilant of what cards have been discarded and what cards are still in the encounter deck. If you don't want to get hosed by these Kree people, and obviously has the Kree armor to make her just a little bit tougher. So again, so those are my 3 suggestions if you want to kind of decrease the difficulty by a little bit. Now, if you want to increase the difficulty, here are my top 3 suggestions to increase the difficulty. Again, trying to control and bring down the surging. The first one is symbiotic strength. Again, has like the symbiotes that are pretty cool. Has the violent tendencies, the improvised weapons, and then got the swinging assaults. So I know it does increase the difficulty a little bit more than just having a few minions. So there's a couple minions with guard and patrol that come in. So for me, swinging symbiotic strength is a great modular set here to increase Nebula's difficulty and also reducing the amount of surge. All right, the second one I would highly recommend to include to increase the difficulty but reduce the surge is the Inheritors. That's right, there's another 9 modular set here with all of these bad boys. Even if you're playing with one of the spider characters or not, these guys, they are pretty good. They also have their own little side scheme that can come in and do some work here. So for me, the Inheritors, again, adds to the difficulty because they are more powerful minions, but also decreases the difficulty of Nebula by, you know, removing the amount of surge that can be seen in the game. All right, and then finally, the last one to increase the difficulty, and this one really does increase the difficulty. It is the Anachronauts, and this not by a little bit. This one gives the villains obviously 2 more boost cards. All of them give them extra boost cards, which means and have these really negative effects, which is pretty bad. So again, getting more boost cards means Nebula has more chance to finding her techniques. So with the Anachronauts, it really ups that difficulty. Also, the modular set, the Anachronauts, has these side schemes that just keep shuffling these guys back in. And then Kang's Chosen, which is also going to increase how fast you go through that encounter deck. So the Anachronauts, if you want a really good challenge here, have fun with that. And then finally, just for the lulz, my last recommendation for the lulz, it's not hard. It is all of the modular sets from Mojo. So, and just include them all. So if you're going to do one, just put them all in. So you just put in horror, fantasy, you put the Western, you put them all in, or you choose 2 if you want. But I've played it where you play all of them, sci-fi, and it just makes it a really thick encounter deck. And it just makes it kind of wacky where you're just kind of going all over the place for a Mojo Vision here. So very fun with Nebula. Very much for the lulz. Again, you don't know what's going to happen. So even when it surges, it's never something like truly horrendous. It's not like a giant surge fest of like 5-6 cards. Most of the times it's just maybe 1 card that it surges into, like an environment or a minion or an obligation. So for me, this was one of the most fun ways to play Nebula, by just including all 6 of those modulars with the Milano ship. And I was just having a blast playing Nebula. Did not feel oppressive at all. So and again, but this is not like a standard legal way to play, or just include 1 or 2 if you want to play it more into the rules. It's up to you, right? You know, you guys will choose how you want to play it. Mine are just suggestions on what to have some fun with. So guys, that is my suggestions for the recommended modular sets for Nebula and a good time. Now let's go take a look at some of the top cards to include in each aspect when you're taking on the Surge Queen. All right, let's start with aggression. So one of the first ones I would say to recommend is obviously the Stun Confuse strategy against a villain like Nebula. Is also going to reduce the difficulty significantly unless she gets one of her stalwart cards. But the dropkick will stun her if you pay the cost. Psylocke also with the double confuse is something that is very important in this game, especially that her main scheme on Nebula's ship is extremely low and can really pop off anytime. One that I can't suggest and I can't recommend, and just be careful because Sunfire cannot discard the techniques off of Nebula because they are not hero responses. There's nothing that says hero response to get rid of them. So unfortunately, Sunfire is not a good recommendation to play when you're playing against Nebula. In protection, if you're going to be playing anything, you better be playing 3 copies of Defiance. This will also reduce the chances that you are going to be getting those boost cards, those techniques. It will cancel the card, so her techniques will just get discarded and never come into play. So this will really, really help you. If you pair that with Tackle, you should have yourself a pretty easy game in protection versus the Nebula. If we look at Justice, there's a few more cards in Justice. First of all, Global Logistics is amazing here. You only need 1 shield card, so if you play a helicarrier or something and the 3 copies of this Global Logistics, you should be in order to kind of determine, oh, look, she's got 3 techniques coming up. Bye-bye, just throw them in the garbage or put them at the bottom of the deck, or you could you discard them, you put them on top or at the bottom in any order. So Global Logistics, probably the best card in Justice to play. Aside from that, I definitely recommend Concussive Blows and Sonic Rifles. As allies, I also recommend Wraith. So Wraith paired up with the Global Logistics, you are pretty sure to never see her, and make sure you bring some first aids for Wraith. But when a boost card is turned face up again, you deal a damage to him and you cancel that card's boost effect. So again, if it has, if it's supposed to attach, you will not attach it, and you just use Wraith as a pin cushion here to get rid of those attachments. And then Dazzler, a new card from, who's that again? Gambit's deck. So there you go. So, and then she comes in and can confuse the Nebs. So those are really good cards in Justice to be included. In Leadership, we have Captain Marvel that has a chance, depending how you built your deck, to stun a Nebula and deal some damage. The other cards I would recommend are cards like Ready for Action, giving your heroes, or your allies some tough status cards, so they can block Nebula, and then you can just stay up and you get ready to just kind of bash face here. So you can use your allies to defend and without losing them. So for me, those are the only 2 cards that I really liked in Leadership against Nebula. But in Basics, if you're not running 3 copies of this against Nebula, you are doing something. You are forgetting something, my friends. So Target Acquired, it is the card that can go in every deck, every aspect. So again, this will cancel her revealed boost effects. So you can, if she gets one of her techniques and you don't want that one, you just trigger the Target Acquired and it's never coming into play. So this is a small price to pay, especially if you're playing Nebula on the Expert and she's on stage 2 or 3. Multiple copies of your deck. Make sure that you use them as soon as they pop off. And then finally, there's a couple of allies that I would suggest. Vivian is always good because they are they are attachments, so you can cancel some of her attachments, and then the Force Interrupt will still happen, so which is fun. So if there's one that's really nasty that you don't like, that what she can bring, you can just cancel its effect. So when she activates, it's not going to trigger, but it will still get discarded with the rest. So that is very, very good. Mockingbird and Professor for another stun and confuse combo here with the basic cards. So that is it, guys, for Nebula. Obviously, give her a shout, give her a try now with some of these recommendations. I know she can be a pain. I've been there. I've been frustrated by Nebula as well. But playing with some of these recommended modulars has really, really made that experience way better. And some of these cards that I've just suggested can definitely bring the odds in your favor to have a way better experience versus Nebula, even if you don't want to use some of these modular sets that I have recommended and you just want to play her the normal way. So on that note, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it will give you the motivation to go and revisit Nebula. I've actually been enjoying replaying her a couple times. So for me, it's been way more fun with some of these recommendations. So check it out. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Again, don't forget, when we hit that 2K subscribers, we do have a special event with some giveaways. And for you guys, we have some hero packs, and then we have some make it shine products to make your heroes and your cards foil. So that could be a really nice gift that you may receive. Don't forget, if you have any comments, leave them down below. If you have any suggestions of modulars that you've tried out that make Nebula a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun that I have omitted, please let me know in the comments down below. Remember to subscribe, put that little like button, and remember to just have some fun and play the game. See you on the next one. Ciao, ciao.